Before we do anything further, let's take time and discuss what we are trying to achieve, or what is this application all about. What we need our server to be able to do is to provide an API for users on our platform to be able to create recipes, get recipes that is created by anybody on the platform, get recipe that they themselves have created, and also get a single recipe. So I can see the recipe from everybody. I can take a look at a single recipe. I can also create recipe and view the recipes that I have created. The other thing we want to do is also the searching ability. I want to be able to type in a keyword and get recipes that has that keywords in them. So that is what we want to build. So with that, we also need to add an authentication, a very simple authentication, because we don't want anybody to just come to the platform. We want people that are authenticated to be able to use this platform. So what database are we going to be using to do this? Since we need to store these recipes somewhere, we need to store this user somewhere. So we're going to use a database that doesn't get wiped out. Example, if we create a database or maybe an array or an object here, if our server restarts, we will lose that, all the details we have there. So we are going to be using the mongoDB database. So let's quickly go and set up a mongoDB account. Now, I'm going to use mongoDB Atlas because it is the most simplest thing I can see right now. Everybody can follow along. All you have to do is just have an internet connection. We don't want to worry about installing mongoDB, setting up all that. All you have to do is follow the instruction, follow the video, and then we're all together. So let's go to mongoDB. So if you go to mongodb.com, you'll find yourself on the landing page. Depending on when you take a look at this, it might have changed or not. You want to, if you don't have a mongoDB account, you have to click on try free, which is going to take you to register. Now, I already have a mongoDB account, so I'm not going to do all this. So what I'm going to do is either you fill this information to get an account, or you can click sign up with Google. So any of them that you want to do, you use. If you have a Google account, you can just use Google account. Now, once you are done and you have signed up, then you would click on sign in, or just find yourself on the sign in page. So let me click on sign in here. So when you go to click on sign in, you are now going to be presented with options. You can say, okay, I want to sign in with Google, I want to sign in with GitHub, or I want to sign in with my email address. I'm going to click sign in with Google. You can use your email and your password. If you put your email here, you will ask for password, or you can just use Google or GitHub. So I'm going to click sign in with Google, and it's going to ask me which of my Google account I want to sign in with. So I have to add one now. I guess I have to add a password. I hope I remember my password. Just hope so. Yeah. Then it's asking for verification that I am the one, the way Google does this. So let me take a look at my mobile device and see if I can verify that it is me. Where is it? I need to tell Google that it is me. So I'm going to say, yes, it's me from my mobile device. And then I think I'm being redirected. Now, this is the screen that I'm presented. There are high chances that this is not what you're going to see. You would be seeing, for you to choose a tier, a free tier or not, and all that, to create a cluster. But right now, this is what MongoDB has been telling me to do, that I don't belong to any organization. So if you are seeing the same thing, then you go with me. If you are not, I can't say right now, but I believe we should be able to figure it out. You are going to see, I believe, for you to put a project name, perhaps, and then pick is it Amazon or Google or wherever, and then what data center do you want to use? So in this case here, I'm just going to click create an organization. So it seems like I don't belong anywhere. So I click on that. And then what am I going to call this organization? I think I will just, I don't even know. Let me just call it, excuse me. Let's say, I don't know. Can I change the name later? I don't even know. Say Foodie Doody. So this is my organization, Foodie Doody. I don't really know what that means. And then it's showing me some features. I have of MongoDB Atlas. I'm just going to click on next. It says I should add member. I don't have anybody to add here. So I'm the organization owner because I'm the one creating it. Look at my email there. So I'm going to go to create organization. So I'll click on that. And then I think it has created an organization. I need to add a project. So I'm going to click on new projects. The project is going to be called, I just call it Foodie. I think everything is going to be called Foodie here. And then I am the project owner here. I'm going to click on create new project. And then let's see what we have. Okay, so mongodb takes me here now and is asking me to create a database. If you look at this place, it's saying that my current IP address is not added. So I'm going to just click add, even though I will change that later in the network access. You can do that if you want to configure a firewall. For example, you can add your server IP, but in this case here, I'm going to whitelist it later on so that any IP is allowed. Then maybe when you are deploying, you can add your server IP to avoid anybody from another server trying to connect to your database. So now let's assume that it all goes fine on your end and you get here because this is what MongoDB presented to me and I've gone through it. But if you go through other ways and you find yourself here, you have an organization, you must have an organization, I believe, and you have a project, and then you're asked to create a database. So let's create a database. I'm going to click on create new database. Now, yeah, I think this is where I was talking about that you will find yourself. You either find yourself here, if you just register for the first time, I don't know, but you are supposed to find yourself something like here. Let me zoom out a bit. And then you are going to click on the create that has a free plan. You're going to create on the free one. Click on it. So we want to create a free cluster. We don't care. I'm just going to leave everything as default. And then I'm going to click on, can we change the cluster name? Let's call it Foodie API, whatever. Is it Foodie Doody? Yeah, so that is the cluster name. I'll click on create cluster. So this is exactly where I was talking about that. I believe it should have taken me directly. So I'm going to click on create cluster, and then a cluster is being created for me. It's going to ask me for a username and a password. I'm going to say foodie as the password underscore doody, foodie underscore doody as the username, I mean. As for the password, I'm going to click auto generate. So it has generated a password for me, and I'm going to copy it. Please copy if you use auto generate. So, and then I'll just go back to our application, to our env, and I'll just paste it there. Now don't worry about this. I'm going to remove this when I'm done, so it's not going to be working if you try to copy it to use it. So right now I'm going to click on create user. So this user has been created for our application, and for our server, sorry, I'm seeing IP address. I'm just going to ignore this for now. I will come back and just say finish and close. For now, let's say go to database. All right, so we now have a database called Foodie Doody. I'm sorry, is that what I call the database? I don't remember. But first of all, I want to go back to the network. Go to the network access. We go to the network access here. Click on network access on your left. I want to say that, where is it? I think I should have, uh, let's click on edit, and let's say allow access from anywhere. So that is like whitelisting. Anybody can get access to this. But this, please change this if you are in like in the production application, add your server IP and make it behind a firewall to avoid anybody from anywhere just getting access to your database. So confirm. Now anybody from anywhere can connect, not only the my IP is still pending though, my IP address. So it is now active now. What do you want to do? Go back to the left side and then go to the database. And then what do you want to do? Click on connect, which is just the thing we want to do here. Click on connect. Click on connect your application. Then you are going to copy this URL here. This is what we are going to use. So I'm going to go back to the env and I'm going to say mongoDB underscore URI. And it's going to have this. Now, let me actually close this. Now, remember this is the password I generated. I'm going, you might have something like, instead of foodie doody like I have, you might have something like username in your own. So you're just going to replace that username with the username you created for your user. And then the password, you're going to replace it with the password. So this is my mongoDB URI. If you want to know where to find that, you can just go back to your mongoDB. We are done with this, so we are going to close. If you want to find your user, just go back to database access here under security, and then you see the name, which is foodie doody, and then you can edit. What can it do? This is an admin, you can do read and write to any database. You can also edit what they can do from this edit panel here. But I'm going to go back to the deployment and just go back to database here. So I have my mongoDB URI ready. So now I should be able to use this in my application. One other thing I need to pick is that our database name, if you remember, is foodie doody. So let's just pass that to our query, our URI. So we are going to say after this mongodb.net. So after here, if you see it says mongodb.net, please just pass in the database name foodie doody, which is our database name. So this is good. So in case you have multiple database, then we are going to have this. I think it's actually capital letter. So you can change that. I think it's capital. Let me take a look again. Yeah. So you can change that to make sure that it's the same, foodie doody. So that if you have multiple database, MongoDB knows which of the database to connect to. Like I said, don't worry about this password and everything. I'm going to change that later on. So please create your own. All right. So now we have the MongoDB setup. One other thing we need to do is to simply configure this application to connect to mongoDB. So let's go back to our index.js here. We are going to do that from here. But before we do that, let's install mongoose. Mongoose is an ODM for mongoDB, and it's going to enable us to write our schemas, our queries, our models very, very easy. So let's go back to the terminal here, and I'm going to I will just terminate this for now. And I'm going to say yarn add mongoose. So I've added the mongoose package. What else are we going to do? We are going to use it in our application. So let's go back here. After the helmet, let's import connect from mongoose. So let's import this from mongoose. And then what do we want to do? So after this 404 whatever, this wildcard route, let's create a function. Let's call it runDB. So this is going to initiate a call to going to be async. So it's going to be an asynchronous function. And what do we want it to do? It's very simple. We simply want to say connect. We are calling the mongoose connect. And we're going to say process.env.mongodb underscore URI. So we are going to pass in our mongodb URI that we have in our environment variable. So we are reading it, and we are saying that it's going to be a string, and then we are just calling .then since it's a promise. So if it connects successfully, we are going to see on in our console, it's going to say DB connected successfully. Then if it fails to connect successfully, it's going to say DB not connected. So we now call the runDB here. So we call the function here. With this now, when we start our server is going to connect to the database, and it's going to be listening on port, whatever port we've passed in our environment variable. So with this now, we will be able to connect to mongoDB at last. So if I go back to our terminal now and I run yarn dev, so we should either see DB connected successfully or DB not connected, and then we'll also see the server listening. So let's hit enter. All right, so if you look at our terminal and look at what it prints out, it says server listening on port 4000, DB connected successfully. So this simply means that our database has connected successfully. So whatever we are doing now, we can talk to the database, we can put data there, we can pull data from there, and everything will work fine. Let's build up the application by first of all modeling our database schema. So how do we want our schema to look? What kind of data do we want to store? And how do we want to store it? So for the user, what kind of data are we going to store? So let's go to our Explorer here, right inside the source folder. Let's create a folder called models. So here we are going to store our models. So now inside the models, I'm going to create a file called index.ts. This index.ts is going to export everything from the models. Now go back to the models and also right click on new file and add a folder called user.ts. So this user.ts is going to contain our schema for the models. So let's import some items from mongoose. So let's import schema. Let's import model. Let's import models. Let's say from mongoose. And also let's import model itself. Now, first of all, let's create an interface of how our user model is going to look. So let's call it iUser. And we are going to have an optional underscore ID. So I'm going to call it, it's going to be a string. We're just going to have an email, which is going to be a string, and also have a password, which is going to be a string. So with this now, we now know the shape of our user. So what we're going to do for the user in our case is that the user is only going to have the email and password property. We're not storing username, we're not storing any of that. That could be an improvement on your part if you want to do that. But for this application, we're just storing the email and the password of the user. And once we do that, let's create our user schema. So we're going to say user schema const user schema is equals to new schema. And then we are going to first of all pass in the shape, which is the iUser, and then we pass in our model. So what do we have here? We are going to have an email, and the email is going to be of type string, and it is required. We are saying unique is true, so we do not want the same multiple people to use one email. We're also saying lowercase true and index true. Then we have a password. We say the password is of type string and required is true, so you must have a password. But then we say that select is false. We don't want password coming back from our queries without we requesting for it. Then we also add timestamp to be true. So what timestamp true simply means is we want created at and updated at to be available in it. So whenever we just run it, it's going to add created at and updated at fields. Then auto index is true. To JSON and to object, we said virtual true. So this will not be persisted in the database, but they will be useful for us in our own, well, as we query the database and get information from it. So this is the shape of our user schema, and then this is just what it's going to have: an email and a password. The ID will be automatically added by mongoDB itself. Now we then export the model as user. So we say export const user is equal to models as models.user. So we are saying that if this is available, this simply means that if this is available, use it. If not, then create. To avoid issue of saying we are trying to create a user when it already exists. So that is why we had to do this here. So earlier on I had that issue and I figured out that this is just an easy way to get past that. So if we already have models.user, which is of type model, and then it has the shape of iUser, then just go on with that. Else, we need you to create one for us. So that is what we are doing here. And then we pass in the user schema here. So we are saying create a model, and the model shape is going to be user. The name is going to be user. Then on the database is going to be called users. So, and then we have the user schema. So with this now, we are done with this user model. The next thing we are going to create is the recipe. So let's go back to models, and let's right click and click on new file, and let's create recipe.ts. Now let's import some package, some items from the mongoose package. So we're going to say import schema, import, let's get schema types, and let's get models. First, let's create a shape for the recipe. So I'm going to call it iRecipe. So this is the shape of our recipe, and it's going to say we are going to have a title, which is going to be a string. We are going to have a note, which is this is going to be optional, which is also going to be a string. So the note is optional, doesn't have the question mark. We're also going to have a description, which is going to be a string. We also have ingredients, which is also going to be a string. What else? Okay, and then we are going to have an image. Now our image, let's create a type for the image, because let's say interface coming image. Our image is going to be saved on Cloudinary. So we're going to get two details back. We're going to get the image secure URL and also the public ID. So for example, let's say you want to delete the image later from Cloudinary, then you actually need to pass in the public ID. So I'm going to say it's going to have a URL. Let's call it URL in our case. So this is a string. This is the one that's actually for the image, and the ID, which is going to be a string. This is the public ID that what's it called? Cloudinary will return when you use it. So we're going to say that the image is of type image. So now we have this our shape ready, and we are going to create the recipe schema. So I'm going to sequence recipe schema is equals to new schema, and we pass in the shape, which is iRecipe, and then we pass in our configurations. Now, one thing you should know is this, which let me close this up. First of all, we are passing our user, and then we are saying that the user is of type schema types.object ID, and we have here reference user. What does this do? Now, each recipe that is going to be created belongs to somebody, belongs to a user on our platform. Somebody created them. So what we are going to do, what we are doing here is that we are saying that we want to reference that user. So there are two ways that you can do that in mongoDB. You can either embed the document in the user. So for example, when a user creates a recipe, we take that recipe and put it in the user object. Or which the second method, which is what we are doing here. What we are doing here is that we are getting a key from the user, and we then pass that key to the recipe object. For example, I'm using object here. So what we are not doing is, if we need to get whoever owns this recipe, we look at the key and say, oh, this key belongs to this user, so this belongs to this user. So that's what we are doing here. So in this case now here, we are just calling it user, but what we're actually storing is the user ID, because we know that the ID is unique to each individual user. So what we are doing now is, when you create a recipe, we store your ID with that recipe. So without your ID, that your ID serves as a reference for us. It's a foreign key. It is a reference. So what we're now doing is, whenever we want to get you, we can use that your ID and go to the user side and say, oh, give us the user that has this ID, and then we get you back. So that is referencing in mongoDB. Whereas when we take the recipe and we embed it, we add it to the user collections, that becomes an embedded document. So that is another way to do this, but we don't want to fill up the user collection or object with different schema. Each time you create a schema, we are adding up, and then we don't want to do that. So we just want the schema to be on its own, alone, and then whenever we need to know whoever created this schema, we can just reference the user and get that information back. So that is what this does. Then we have a title. Obviously, if you remember our shape, and my type is of type string, required is true. So everything here that you see is just the same as you saw earlier in the user side. So I don't need to take the whole time explaining that. Yeah. What did I do wrong? Oh, it seems like I didn't pass the user to the shape. Okay, I didn't pass that. So I'm going to go say user is a string. The user is generated when we are working with this field, maybe when we are creating a recipe. So I'm just going to flag it as optional. But then we know that when we are creating this, we must have a user. We must have a user. So you can also pass a flag, maybe required to be true, but this is just fine. I know we must have a user. And then the same thing we did, timestamp to be true. We're just saying created at, updated at, and then every other thing is the same as the previous one. So let's move on. Let's now export this recipe schema. So going below here, we are going to say export const recipe, which is now we are creating a model with this shape of iRecipe, and it's going to have the name of recipe. So in the database, it's going to have recipes, and then we are passing in the recipe schema. So we are telling mongoose, mongoDB that okay, this is the model, and this is the shape. This is just a TypeScript, and this is the name we are going to call it for us in the collections, and then this is the shape of this particular model. So I'm going to save this now, and we have our schemas ready. One other thing I need to do is to go back to the index in the models, go to the index.ts and export these two from there. So I'm going to say export. I'm going to export recipe, and I'm also going to export user. So these two things are coming from the these guys here. So I want everything to be exported from an index so that I can know that this is the central point where everything in this particular folder is coming from. So that is that, and we now have our schema ready. So we can then move on to the other part of our application.